Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, it's another One Piece at a Time talking head and hat video. Anyways, I hadn't checked in for a little bit this week, and thought it was high time I did a set of questions here. But as always, I'm looking for your questions, guys. I need your questions for content in order to keep everything rolling forward. And yes, granted, I have been a little busy here lately with Old Homestead Distillery, which is moving right along. We just distilled our first absinthe, the first of 3 absinthes that we will be working on to come out within the next 365 days, maybe 4 absinthes. Who knows? I might get crazy. Not to make a whole lot of it. This is for the real absinthe lovers, the real distillers who are really into the artisan style spirits. So all kinds of other stuff laid down right now, including the various sunshines that we talked about before, sunflower based moonshines. Essentially sunshine being, a play on both the ingredient sunflower, but also because for me, moonshine is an illicitly distilled non-tax spirit that's made under the light of the moon. Sunshine is a legal version of said thing using all the same methods that I would use if I were moonshining, but done under the light of the sun, because of course I'm paying taxes on it. So anyways, a couple good questions here. I'm gonna get into them. I'm gonna get through them. Send me your questions, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. Honestly, guys, that's the best possible place to send me the questions, because oftentimes you send them on social media, I miss them, or if they end up in YouTube comments, I forget about them, unfortunately. You can leave them there, and hopefully I will catch them and reply to them as quickly as possible. If not, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then send them to bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. We are planning on doing classes at Old Homestead Distillery. I'll have announcements on that at some point in time. I'll have an announcement on tours at some point in time. There's an Indiana distilling documentary coming up that we will be showing at Old Homestead Hotel and Distillery sometime in September. Hopefully news will break on that soon. That's not really my news to break. So we'll wait for the official announcement before we tell you about it. I do intend to set up at the Spring Mill Candlelight Tour again this year as well, and talk about the old Daisy Spring Mill Distillery once again, as I so love doing that, and progress is happening on that project too. So from Jeff, we've got, good morning, Alan. I was watching and reading some of your Facebook posts, which I find very informative as well, and saw a couple of videos of you knocking down the grain/sunflower seed caps in the fermenters for your sunshine distillate. I was always under the impression that after pitching the yeast and getting the mash oxygenated so the yeast could thrive, and that the grain cap shouldn't be knocked down until everything was done fermenting, at which point the grain cap would drop on its own. Is there a benefit to knocking down the grain cap in a fermenter periodically, as you were doing in the Facebook video, or was that video taken during the first, say, 24 to 36 hours after pitching the yeast, and you were reintroducing oxygen into the fermenter for the yeast? Also, on a side note, since this question made me think of another question, should the cap for a fruit fermentation be knocked down periodically to keep the cap from possibly growing mold as quickly, since fruit fermentations can take longer if fermentation temperature is held at around 66 to 68 degrees? Good questions, Jeff. Bearing in mind, that I have to be careful what I answer about sunshine, because I very specifically have to protect that for Old Homestead. What I will tell you is that I consistently knock the cap down on the main Sunshine Spirits mash bill, because it is a tremendous amount of black oil sunflower, both malted and unmalted. And that black oil sunflower is very buoyant. It will all float to the top. It doesn't react the same way that a grain fermentation does, where only part of the grain comes to the top and comes to the surface and stays there. It will all come to the top. So in order for that to be in contact with the yeast and with the liquid and the fermentation, it needs to be punched down on a daily basis, almost every single day of the fermentation. Fermentations right now, with temperatures being what they have been, anywhere between 6 and 9 days, in order to get through the fermentation and get it down to dry. With the sunflowers, if you don't keep them knocked down, they will grow mold. They absolutely will. Now, I have not seen any kind of concern out of that in terms of any kind of toxic molds. They are just white molds, the same kind of thing that you will sometimes get on the top of sauerkraut, right? Not really lactic, but something of that nature for sure. So yes, we keep those punched down consistently, daily. It's one of my daily jobs in the distillery. I go around, I check the fermenters, and I'm punching that stuff down, and I'm mixing it good. The other thing that allows me to do is that also allows me to keep oxygen in there. I'm using a good strong yeast strain that has no problem overtaking any sort of bacteria such as acetobacter or anything that would cause VA or Brett or anything of that nature in any way, shape, or form. And we've had no problems with fermentation since I figured out the pH issue I addressed previously. In terms of fruit, yes, in my opinion, you should be doing a punch down at least for probably the first 5 to 6 days of a fruit fermentation. Now, I'm not saying stir that vigorously, but I'm saying you need to keep that fruit punch down. If you don't keep that fruit punch down, it is going to oxidize. You can see it. It'll turn brown, and it is going to invite bacteria and potentially even green flies, right? Because there's a cap holding the CO2 down. The flies, you know, if the CO2 is not coming off, the flies are going to get in there, and you don't want that. That's bad. That's it's not a good time. I've been there before in my life as a home distiller / moonshiner, and that'll turn your stomach real quick. Now, the only other way to get around that is sort of what they do with Palinka and Slivovitsia quite often, which is where they're gathering fruit as they go, throwing it into a barrel, letting it ferment off of its own yeast, liquefy off of its own pectinase, you know, doing incredibly long fermentations from the fall into the cold months where fermentation basically stops except for the warmer days, and letting that finish the next spring. And then what they do is they'll go in, usually before the fermentation's even completely finished, because a lot of that yeast that's on the wild fruit there won't finish out a fermentation, and they will literally scrape off that crust of, you know, oxidized fruit that's full of VA, probably flies as well, from the top before they distill it. At least we're hoping that most of them do anyways. I mean, you know, distillation can warrant some dirtiness, and some dirtiness is okay, and it ain't going to hurt nothing. And even some fruit spirits warrant a little bit of VA in the distillation. I prefer to keep it punched down, right? I'm also using barrel covers that are breathable over top of the fermentation casks that we are using specifically to avoid the flies, but also still have that interaction with the other microbiome elements that I want in those fermentations. So one of the big things I'm huge on at Old Homestead is I want that microbiome around the lake to be a part of every one of our fermentations. I want true terroir in our fermentations at Old Homestead, and we are getting that. We are absolutely there. I mean, my barrels, they're yeast logs at this point, right? They get cleaned, they get sanitized, etc., but they are full of yeast, and they are full of that bacteria, that beneficial bacteria that is going to give us our flavor profile for those sunshine spirits for sure. So it's not completely sanitary, it's not completely perfect, it's not completely clean, and nor does it need to be, but can't deal with the green flies or real high levels of VA. Plus, the VA as well, obviously, is going to eat your alcohol, and the more exposure to the open that you have, the more alcohol you're going to evaporate before it ever hits the still, so your yield goes down. But I think that kind of answers that question. Let me go on to the next one here. So this one is from Ron. So, hey Alan, love your videos. I have a question about the Weaver. Ooh. Did you run it on propane? If so, did you use a diffuser plate of any sort between it and your burner? I've been running mine with a 3/16 inch plate on top of the burner because when my friend and I first got them, guys were saying the pot won't take the open flame. It definitely makes it harder to heat with the plate. Just want your thoughts. Thanks for your time. Hey, I'm glad to get some of these Beaver Lombardi football still questions, because I have become a big believer in these since Bob in Costa Rica sent me the first one and I bought the second one. I think for a home still and a startup still, or a homesteading still, or a survival still, or an essential oil still, I think they're ideal. I'm not going to lie, guys. They're not made bad. The clamps aren't great, but they work. And you can adapt them from 2.5 inch down to 2 inch or 1.5 inch or whatever you want, and get Wayne at Ozark Steelworks to build you all kinds of stuff to go along with them. So they're a great option. You know, I don't really like the clamps on the lids. This is all stuff we talked about before, just throwing some stuff out there. Nonetheless, I saw those comments about how the stainless won't hold up and the stainless is very thin. I'm telling you right now, guys, if you got one of those Weavers and you listen to these guys talk shit, and that's what they do, is they'll talk shit. Now, there are some issues with the cheaper model Weavers, and the football still Weavers aren't perfect either. But if you will open that still up and you'll take a look at it, and take a look at the thickness of the stainless itself, the quality of stainless itself, and then go and look at stainless that's being sold for huge stock pots, etc. at Walmart. Most of them about the same as what that beaver is. Yeah, it's thin, but it ain't going to crack. It ain't going to have any problem on an open flame. I can promise you that. I've run the hell out of mine. You would come closer to having a real problem with a thin copper still, even if it's made by a really good coppersmith, than you will out of the stainless body on those beavers. I'll tell you right now. I have no doubt that, the only thing on those beavers that won't hold up is the clamps that hold the lid down. They're going to give on you at some point in time, so you need to make sure you have those secured. And the stupid little brass 1/4-inch valves. Buy some stainless and replace what's on there. That ain't no big deal. On your clamps, you can always throw some various different, C-clamps or whatever you want to on there to hold that thing down. The cool thing I will say about that lid, though, too, is that wide groove with that gasket in it would be real easy in a pinch. If you needed a gasket, shit had hit the fan and your gasket was wore out, you could easily bread dough that without a problem. You could easily lute that and it would hold up just fine and seal up just fine. But yeah, I don't run mine on a diffuser plate. I run mine on propane. It's not been an issue so far whatsoever. I don't foresee it being an issue. I feel as comfortable with that as I did any of the homemade stainless steel stills that I've ever had. Even if they were a little thicker, it's certainly safer than thin copper on an open flame, would be my opinion. So anyways, guys, reach out to me with questions, comments, etc. about the art of distillation, whether it be professional, home distilling, moonshining. I don't care. It's all the same to me. Be sure to check out Distiller's Talk. Check out the Alchemist Cabinet, where you can get Volume 1 and Volume 2 of my books. The last year's almanac is no longer available. If you haven't ordered it up to this point, it won't be available until I do a collection sometime down the road, where I'll republish all the articles and all that stuff in that collection. The new almanac is underway. I'm writing that as we speak. Getting some pretty cool things together for that. Let's see, what else? Yeah, make sure you check out If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast. We are now on season 5. It just started, and we just interviewed Dr. Justin Sledge of Esoterica, who himself is also a bit of an alchemist and just released an absinthe himself. So be sure you check that out on Spotify and, of course, Distiller's Talk. Love y'all. Later.